I'd like to take a second and talk to you about somebody. This gentleman served in the active duty in the United States Army for 3 years, from 2003 until 2006. He served in the 3rd Battalion, 21st Infantry Regiment, an element of the 1st Brigade, 25th Infantry Division. October 2004, he was deployed to Mosul, Iraq, to support Operation Iraqi Freedom. Currently, he serves as the National Veteran Liaison for Project Welcome Home Troops, a program of International Association for Human Values. He also travels around the country giving intro talks, organizing and assisting in teaching the Power Breath method, workshops for veterans, their families, and active duty military. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tom Voss. Thank you. And we're actually lucky enough today. Tom is actually going to lead us in a little bit of the Power Breath method that you saw at the end of the film, which I thought it was fantastic. So, without further ado, Tom.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for everyone coming. This is really great to see all of you showing up and watching my life. Is pretty strange for me. So, thanks for coming. But first thing we thought we would do is just teach you a little bit of some intro breathing techniques. So what we're going to learn is called alternate nostril breathing. It sounds just like what it is. All we're going to be doing is breathing alternately through each nostril, and it has a nice calming effect. This is something that you can do if you have high anxiety or you're feeling a little bit nervous. It's just a nice quick breathing technique. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking our index finger and our middle finger, and we're just going to be placing them in between our eyebrows right here. All right, it's pretty simple. And then we're going to take our thumb and our ring finger, and these two are actually going to be the ones that are going to be closing off our nostrils. So what we're all going to do first is take a normal breath in through our nose and breathe out through the nose. Let's do that one more time. Breathing in through the nose and exhaling out. So now what we're going to do is close our right nostril with our thumb and inhale through the left nostril. Switching, exhaling out through the right. In through the right. And out through the left. And you can close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that. In through the left. And out through the right. And now you can just continue on your own at your own pace, taking nice deep breaths. See if you can make the breaths just a little deeper. And keeping the eyes closed, you can drop your hand, just rest it in your lap. Return to normal breathing. I want you to think of one thing that you're grateful for in your life. And slowly and gradually, you may open your eyes at your own pace. Great. How's everyone doing? Good? How was that? Good. Cool. Awesome. Well, I think after that, we're ready to start the discussion panel in a nice, more grounded space. I know that film can be a little intense at times, but I'm glad you all made it.
So without further ado, I'd like to bring up the rest of the panel, and I'll bring them up one by one. I'm going to quickly read their bios. Dr. Bailey is a neuroscientist at the War-Related Illness and Injury Studies Center at the VA Palo Alto, an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Stanford. His research interests include rehabilitation treatments for chronic pain, post-traumatic stress disorder, using integrative interventions such as yoga and meditation. He takes a cognitive neuroscience perspective to investigate, to explore their mechanisms of action and how they relate to both mental and psychological functioning. Dr. Peter Bailey. Next joining us is Dr. Natalie Purcell. Natalie is a sociologist and researcher in the Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences at the University of California, San Francisco. And she is currently the Patient-Centered Care Program Director at the San Francisco VA Healthcare System. In her role at the VA, Dr. Purcell works to improve veterans' health care by promoting personalized, patient-driven care planning and expanding the range of integrative health and wellness resources available to veterans. Dr. Purcell's research focuses on the impact of violence and moral injury in the lives of our veterans and on the effectiveness of integrative health care intervention for veterans. Dr. Purcell. Dr. McGann is a mental health director of the OEF Integrated Care Clinic and staff psychologist on the post-traumatic stress disorder clinical team at the San Francisco VA Medical Center. Her research interests fall under the umbrella of PTSD, moral injury, and suicide, and include risk and resilience factors in veterans, with a particular focus on female veterans. Dr. McGuinn was a recipient of the VA Health Services Research and Development Grant that examined the impact of killing in veterans of war and moral injury. She also works in a clinical capacity within the OEF, Integrated Care Clinic, treating veterans with evidence-based treatments for PTSD. Dr. Shira McGann. And we also have Michael Collins joining us from the team. We've already given his bio, so I'm not going to talk about it again, but thank you for joining. So without further ado, I'd like to kick the panel off, and I think the first best question that we could probably ask is this one, is we see a gentleman sitting up here that we've seen on the screen, maybe with a bit less of a beard, but I'm sure we'd all like to know. Tom, could you tell us a little bit about what's been going on in your life since the film?
Yeah, a lot actually. I've been traveling around with the film, doing kind of talks like this, and also organizing workshops for veterans. So the Power Breath Meditation workshop that you saw in the film is Project Welcome Home Troops is an organization that I volunteer for, and it's something, as you saw, that had a huge impact in my life. And before taking that workshop, you wouldn't have caught me dead in a yoga and/or breathing class. But I was to a point where I was able to try anything to kind of feel better and to move forward with my life. So it has had a tremendous impact on me, and I'm just trying to share that with as many veterans and civilians alike.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to actually start, we saw that a little bit in the end of the film. We talked about PTSD and moral injury and moral dilemma, right? And the difference between the two. I'm hoping, Dr. McGann, could you tell us a little bit more about the relationship between PTSD and moral injury?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, first I want to just say that I think PTSD is more of a diagnosis, so that's really important to recognize, whereas moral injury is more something that we think about on a continuum. It's a problem that people face, but one that is not a diagnosis. And as we saw in the film, it's really about feeling like you crossed over some line that goes against that you went against your own moral beliefs and expectations situations, and that as a result, you're really having some struggles or some inner conflict in relation to that. So when we think about PTSD, PTSD is really made up of several different symptoms. And so with PTSD, you really think about a person having re-experiencing symptoms, meaning they're having nightmares or dreams about what happened to them, as an example. They also avoid, to a great respect, what reminders of what happened to them while they were deployed, reminders of the emotional experience that they might have felt. So if they felt fear or guilt or shame, they try to avoid those emotions as well. And then the third part of PTSD is arousal. And so you saw in the film that difficulty with anger or difficulty falling asleep or feeling like you were just on constant alert or that you were easily startled. And so those three pieces really make up PTSD. In addition to that, people also sometimes have thoughts about what they did or what they experienced that can cause them to really feel down or to want to isolate. With moral injury, again, the idea is that you have crossed some line and that as a result, really you feel some deep guilt and some deep shame, possibly, and also some isolation. And in addition to that, there's a failure to be able to forgive yourself for what you did. And so I think that that was really very nicely highlighted in the film, that the struggle was really with how you saw yourself as a person and a struggle with the failure to forgive, and which, once that was tackled, really helped the person to cross that line and heal. And in many cases, we see that with many of the veterans that we work with as well. And so I think that really, if we think about it as a Venn diagram, you can have PTSD and you can have moral injury, and those things do have a lot of overlap, but you can also have PTSD without moral injury and moral injury without PTSD as well. And so, so I think that, again, if we think about PTSD with really having PTSD as a result of something that happened to you, being exposed to a lot of IEDs, a lot of explosions, your body is on alert. That's more what PTSD looks like. And moral injury is more about guilt and shame and a failure to forgive oneself that can really lead to things that we saw in the film, like suicide, like sabotaging your relationships, and sometimes that inner conflict, that once you find that inner peace, things can go very, very differently. So hopefully that helps with clarifying the two to a little bit, to a greater extent.
Thank you very much. This is one I'd like to actually open up to the panel. During World War II, our veterans were welcomed home with parades, confetti. Everybody knows the famous VJ picture where sailor's kissing his lovely lady in the middle of Times Square. But now our veterans come home to racial tension, political unrest, and an unknown future. What kind of effect does this now have on our veterans as opposed to when we were coming home in World War II? Love to hear from anybody.
That's a nice one. Anyone want to take it? I mean, I can talk from the veterans' perspective a little bit. I mean, for me coming home was difficult for me because when I got back from my deployment, I was out of active duty within 2 months. So I came home from a combat zone, and 2 months later I was back home in Wisconsin, sitting on my mom's couch. And it was surreal for me to see that my friends were doing the exact same things that they were doing when I left. And I had this awesomely terrifying experience of war. And so I had no one to connect with. And then you start seeing I remember just coming home and seeing how many advertisements there were, and that just like blew me away. I was like, wow, like everyone was running around and everything was like so much faster when I came back. So there's this big disconnect within myself to really, I just felt like I couldn't, like, there's no way I can connect with anyone because no one's gonna understand what I've just been through. So I think that on top of that, you see the social unrest and the things that are going on. At least for me, it was like, okay, we're over here fighting these wars, and then we come back and it's just like as turbulent, if not worse, back home. So then that pulls into question, what was I participating in? What was I doing? And I know that Anthony's turning point was when he was a convoy commander and he was driving across. He was escorting a convoy across Iraq. And when he got to where he was going, like literally driving across the whole country of Iraq, he asked the driver of the semi-truck, what are you guys doing? Like, what are you guys hauling? They're like, oh, nothing. We're just making a quota for our run. And that's when he started questioning, what are we doing? What am I doing right now? Like, I'm risking my guy's life so they can make a quota for their contract. So there's a lot of internal questioning that goes on, at least for me when I came home.
Thank you.
Speaking from a non-veteran perspective, but something that I hear from veterans is there's a huge amount of training that goes into training to be a soldier. Something that you touched on in the documentary, this many months of over and over repetitive muscle memory that can really ingrained. And when you're coming back, when you're returning, there's no training how to turn that off. You're sort of back in society. There's no untraining of that. And so I hear from the veterans that I work with that that's a basic problem, that there isn't the understanding of how to untrain, if that's the right word, or people often use the word extinction in a more cognitive level, how to extinguish that, and that's one of the dilemmas.
Great, thank you. So one of the things that we just heard about a little bit was just about some of those tension, that feeling when you come back, and some of those anxiety feelings that you have. So some of the symptoms of PTSD are often expressed through the body. Things like increased heart rate and hypervigilance. What are some of the alternative treatment methods that are studying and training right now? Dr. Bailey, I'd love to hear from you.
So some of the alternative treatments is, one of them is just what we saw at the very end of that documentary, where the power breath or Sudarshan Kriya Yoga is used. That's still in an experimental stage. We're actually running a clinical trial right now at the VA in Palo Alto, comparing that to the best practice in clinical medicine and comparing its effectiveness. Some of the other non-standard treatments are things like acupuncture. That's also fairly widely used, and biofeedback is another one. Biofeedback using perhaps stimuli that are eliciting some of the anxiety or the symptoms of PTSD, and trying to pair that with a more relaxation kind of a response. These kind of things are really still in their infancy. Yoga is one other type of treatment as well. Again, it's not as widely used a treatment as you might think. It sounds like a good treatment, and there is some preliminary evidence to say it is, but there's lacking in large trials to really show that that's as effective as some of the other treatments that are currently available.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's amazing that we're looking outside the box and trying to search for new answers.
Yeah.
I would like to ask, actually, Dr. Purcell, what are some of the things and programs that the VA has in action to support our veterans struggling with PTSD and moral injury? And what advice could you give to those veterans that are looking and seeking for help?
Well, I was really struck at the end of the movie, Tom, when you actually spoke to Congress about this, about advocating for meditation to become a part of the services that the VA offers. And I think increasingly at a national level, there's a recognition at VA that we really need to increase the range of complementary and integrative health services that are available to veterans. And there's a commitment to a vision of care called whole health. And, you know, in a national presentation from the Office of Patient-Centered Care and Cultural Transformation about the direction that the VA is going in for the future, there's a quote from Plato that really sticks with me and I think really captures where the VA is headed. And I hope I remember the quote correctly, but it's something to the effect of, you shouldn't attempt to cure the eyes without the head or the head without the body. So nor should you attempt to cure the body without the soul, because the part can never be well unless the whole is well. And so there's an increasing recognition that we really need to deliver a kind of care that gets at the whole person, at the physical, at the psychological, at the biological, at the social, and at the spiritual level. And at the VA, we're really working to improve access to the range of programs that really touch on those different aspects of veterans' experiences and their lives. Right now, actually, as we're sitting here, we have 4 physicians from the San Francisco VA Medical Center who are in Los Angeles getting training in battlefield acupuncture. And we've been working to build community partnerships with organizations like our YMCA and even our local San Francisco SPCA to bring programs like our Strength and Wellness program with yoga and Tai Chi, animal-assisted therapy programs to veterans. So really opening up the range of treatment options that are available. And one thing that I just want to mention is, as we saw in the film, there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all solution for PTSD or moral injury or the wide range of experiences and struggles that veterans face when they come back. And it's important to recognize that there is this sort of range of options that are available, and that you have the opportunity, if one thing doesn't work, reach out, try something else, don't give up.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So one question I had for the panel: how do gender and race play into the likelihood of veterans deciding to seek help with the VA or elsewhere for the first time?
I think there is incredible shame and stigma associated to seeking any kind of treatment. And so I think that's the first thing to remember across race, across gender. And so I think that it was incredibly brave of Tom to go out there and tell his story. And, it's an incredible to be able to witness that for all of us, for him to share all of that with us. And that's not a common situation. And so I think that a piece of it is really recognizing how profound the stigma is in all of veterans who there are a lot of barriers to seeking care and to getting help and to reaching out and even saying that you might need help. And so I think that that's the first piece. And so, I know that there are a lot of people in the audience who are veterans, who know veterans, who love veterans. You might be a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a wife, a partner, a good friend. And so I think the first piece of that is also thinking across gender and race lines in terms of what we can all do in terms of the community to really help reach out and support veterans who need care to get care. So I think that's the first thing. I think in terms of race and gender specifically, the VA is actually doing a lot to recognize that there are similarities in people who need care, and there are also differences. And so the things that we can do to specifically help women to get to the VA are very important, because predominantly in the past it's been, the VA has felt more comfortable to some men than to women. And so I think just having images on our walls of women who have served goes a long way. And really, we have a women's clinic in particular where women can go, where they can get care separate from men and also be integrated in their care with men as well. In terms of race and ethnicity, I think being sensitive to the ways in which race can affect someone's military service and the certain degrees of discrimination that people might face, and that can be a part of the trauma that they experience as well. So just being really aware of that in their care can be very, very important. So.
Thank you. So I'd like to ask Michael a question quickly. How have you seen the responses to the film? Obviously, leading up to PBS coming on Veterans Day, how have you seen the responses to the screenings, and what kind of things have you taken away from them?
Well, we've been touring with it for about a year and a half, and I have to say every audience is different, but I think what kind of keeps me going is that so many of the responses are just so emotional. You know, I think the civilian response has been one of the most surprising. We really thought we were making this film to give veterans and their families sort of hope that there were other paths of healing if they felt like they had exhausted everything sort of clinically that was out there, that there were these other kind of paths of healing. But it's a lot of the civilians, you know, coming up and saying, I had no idea. Now I want to go and talk to my neighbor and say something besides, thank you for your service. Like, it's breaking down some barriers I'm noticing in people. It's just creating a connection in audiences. And it's different, right? When I play to an audience of Vietnam vets, it's very different when it's college students. And, you know, every single time it's different, but every single time, yeah, there's just something that I learned, that I take away, and that I'm seeing, you know, people are saying the same thing, and then they're wanting to then take the film and bring it back home and bring it to their community and things like that. So we've been working to try to figure out ways to do that, you know, to make the film available for everyone, and we have some ways that I can talk about after.
Fantastic, thank you. And Tom, how about yourself? How have you seen these screenings that you've been a part of? How have they grown?
Well, I mean, I think that the most impact that I have is talking to folks like you, really seeing how it may or may not have shifted your idea about what veterans are going through or what their families are going through. And, you know, I have veterans that come up to me afterwards and they're like, now, you know, I'm going to go hike the Appalachian Trail. Like, that's what I need to do. I know it now. You know, and I'm like, that's great. You should probably ask your wife, but that's awesome. So I support it, but, you know, yeah. So I mean, it's really cool to see how you guys all take it in, and when you guys have questions, that's the best part of it. And you know, Anthony, the same with Anthony. I mean, really just connecting, because with us coming home, and this is what Anthony talks about a lot, and he touched on in the film, is having trust in the community when you come back. And for us to be able to, you know, get up in front of a bunch of people that we don't know and really, you know, trust you with our story and what we went through was a big step for us to do. And now it's easier and easier, and it kind of keeps me going to be able to share my story and know that I can let, you know, some veteran out there, whether it's one or, you know, a pair, that they're not the only ones that are going through this. And, you know, coming home, I felt so isolated being in Wisconsin, only active duty guy to get out of my platoon at that time. So all my buddies are getting ready to go on their second deployment. You know, it's really, it's been a long journey, and I'm really thankful that it came out the way that it has so far.
Thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually started us on the next portion of the night, because we actually want to take some questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. Myself or Amy's going to come around and give you a microphone, and then you can ask a question. Thank you.
All right, Tom, so the trek ended obviously a few years ago, right? Is there anybody that you encountered during the trek that, looking back now with maybe a little more clarity or whatnot, had a bigger impact on you that you didn't notice at the time while you were on the trek, that maybe wasn't in the movie and you would want to talk about for a minute?
There's a lot of people. I mean, there's a lot of stories that happened while Michael and Marty weren't there, which is, you know, unfortunate. They're like, oh, I missed it. But there are a few examples I can give you is that we met a pastor. His name was Pastor Marty. He was in the Marine Corps, and got out and became a rancher, and then became a pastor. Super interesting guy. But he came and brought us water while we were walking, and we had water points kind of mapped out, and he came and took us out to dinner. And what he said to us is, you know, he's like, you know, where you are, he says, life demands a response. And he's like, and you have to figure out what your response is going to be. And then for me, I'm like, okay, am I even responding, or am I just being dragged through the mud? So that was a huge shift for me and Anthony. And then what Anthony and I would do is we talk about that stuff when we're walking. So that's when, like, peer support comes in, where we have this shared experience and we can kind of process this stuff together. So that was a really, really impactful one for us. And then one more is we had a man stop on the side of the road to give us $20 to go get lunch. And he said his brother died in Vietnam. So Anthony always likes to talk about is like how impactful war is, that this man had no idea who we were, had no connection to us, but he thought he was just going to stop and help because his brother was killed in Vietnam, 40, 45 years ago. So that just shows how detrimental war is to us as human beings. So it's not just a isolated event. It just doesn't affect the veteran or their families. It affects their community. It affects generations. Anthony says, I'm going to impart the lessons that I've learned from Iraq on my daughter. So it's like we have to start looking at it in that framework, because then you see how impactful it is, right? So it's generations upon generations upon generations. You look at the displaced people all over the world right now. How is that going to impact their kids? How is that going to impact the communities that they're refugees in? So I mean, you just see the grand scale of this and how it impacts us on a human level, and it's just so detrimental.
Hi, Tom.
Hi.
Something that really stuck out to me in the film, and I'm still thinking about it even as I ask you this question, is Katrinka brought this up. She said, whether you're young or old and you go to war, for a lot of people, especially young, that have never experienced love before, that really stuck with me, because I think that's a lot of the problem is you don't feel love, or you've never felt it if you've never been in love. And maybe the connection is to a parent, but it's totally different.
Sure.
And then you come home and you fall in love, or you get into a relationship with someone, or you have a child, and that's the first time you feel that, and that flashback that she spoke about.
Right.
I don't know if that happened for you. Maybe if it didn't, other people, but
Sure.
Maybe if you can go into that a little more.
Sure. I mean, I think what you can really look at is through, I was in the infantry specifically. I was in reconnaissance battalion, scout sniper platoon. So there's no room, and Anthony kind of touches on this, there's no room for these other emotions in our existence, right? You have compassion, love, these different things that when you're in a combat zone, there's just no time to sit there and analyze things. You have to react. And I think that, as to your point, that's really difficult. You can't just turn it on, turn it off. It's not like a light switch. So I think that when you come back and you start experiencing, you're like, okay, I have to get back into these relationships, when the only relationships I had to worry about while I was overseas was the guy or the girl to the right or left of me when I was serving. And then there's a much more level of complexity that happens, and then you start to reflect on your deployment. And I think it took me about 2 years before I even crashed and burned the first time. And that's when relationships started to deteriorate in my life. I started pushing people away because it was easier for me to push people away and out of my life than to actually have to address the trauma that I've been through. So I think when Katinka talks about that experience, and she had interviewed tons of veterans in the Milwaukee area, she's really talking about these experiences that veterans are having, and making these connections when you come home. You're like, okay, now I call it the unraveling process, right? You're like, okay, what did I just go through? How did that impact me? How is it impacting my family? And that's when you start comparing it to like, okay, well, is this who I really am as a person? Is this how I was raised? And then that's where you have moral conflicts. And I think it's a really interesting point that she made, and it's really impactful too.
Hi, this question is for both the filmmaker and Tom. So I'm curious about a few things, so feel free to ignore some of my questions and answer others. But overall, it's about your process as a filmmaker from beginning until the film was edited and released, and your process being documented by filmmakers, and the relationship between filmmakers and you and Anthony. Specifically, I noticed that in any film you have an arc of a character story, and so we saw your arc and we saw Anthony's arc, and I'm curious, how much were you able to film actually their actual journey and versus what we're seeing, and where do you feel that the filmmaker's presence in your life impacted you positively, and also where you found it difficult, right? Both in terms of what they were capturing, what they weren't capturing. And I noticed, you were quite silent on camera for a lot of the beginning of the film, and I wasn't sure if that was an editing choice or if that was actually what was going on in your journey. But Anthony was talking a lot.
Anthony talks a lot.
Yeah, and then we see this. He had a pivot point on the mountain, and then you had your kind of pivot point revelation later on. But life still continues also after the film is over. So also kind of curious as to now that the filmmaking is no longer in your journey, what have been your struggles since then with the film camera not there, and maybe where you wish the camera was still there? I don't know.
Sure. You can start.
Yeah, I'll start. We weren't there the whole time. We wanted to, the most important thing for me, honestly, when I started this was to make sure that they had the space to have their experience. They wanted to go out and heal themselves, and already it was becoming something a little bit larger, right? It was going to be Veterans Trek. They were raising awareness. They were having this kind of campaign, and then on top of that, you add a camera crew. One good thing is we didn't have the budget to stay with them the whole time, but honestly, I also wanted to give them space because I'm thinking there's a comfortability knowing, and maybe a little frustration when you have a minivan kind of cruising along next to you all day long because we're shooting out of the side and we're doing all these things. But when they have to be out there and really are dependent on the kindness of strangers, that's a big deal. That was something that didn't make it in the beginning. They had their packs, they were like 85, 90 pounds. And they were so weighed down because they were going to carry everything themselves, all the food, all the camping gear. And then after the first day, they just had to unload half of it. And they're like, we're going to just have to depend on other people. And I think that was a part of it, was giving them the space to be out there, to face the elements, to sleep on the side of the road if they had to be in that silence, So that was part of the filmmaking experience. We'd try to come in at strategic points. It was tricky with a moving target, but we did our best. And yeah, in terms of the edit, of course there are choices that are made, right? We had 400, 500 hours worth of footage, and I was nervous. Tom wasn't really talking. He wasn't opening up. And you're like, my main character isn't talking to me, and then this other one won't stop, So we're on the plane coming home, and I'm like, what's happening? Oh my God. And then when I finally just embraced it, I said, that's okay. That's his journey. Put the silence on the screen. Him being closed off. So when Katinka says it, when she says, I realized it when he came home that he was still emotionally closed off, we're all thinking, yeah, I know, we just saw that for the past 40 minutes as well.
Right.
But, in terms of our relationship, of course, over time, you're in very intimate situations with them and you care. You really start to care. There are people who you're around all the time and you're rooting for them and you want them to heal just because you become friends, And to see Tom still struggling at the end was honestly very difficult. The filmmaker in me was like, oh my goodness, this is, it's terrible. We thought it was just going to be point A, point B. But just the human in me was just heartbroken because I was like, he's not where he hoped to be. What's going to happen when he goes home? I don't know. So I was really grateful that he continued on that journey, that he went to Aspen, that he did the Power Breath workshop. Of course, it means we had to fundraise some more and we had to go back into production, but it was great. And then in the edit, when we watched Anthony's arc and Tom's arc go in separate directions, it made the edit a lot more difficult, but it was a lot more true to the story.
And I guess for me, it takes a little getting used to have a camera in your face, 24/7. So it's easy just to not talk. It's great. And but no, Anthony and I how it all kind of began is like I was just like, I need to do something to decompress. Like I haven't addressed this in 10 years. I haven't looked at it. I haven't had the time. And that's partially my fault, right? So I got back, got my own apartment, got into school full time, got a full-time job, just dived right back in. And that, I'd crash and burn. I'd be okay for 3 or 4 months and then destroy relationships, drop out of school and pick myself up and restart. And so that's where it kind of came out of. It came out of that necessity of, okay, I need to do something or otherwise I'm going to end up like another statistic. And I've had 2 guys from my platoon already who've taken their own lives. So it's very prominent in my life. I keep really close tabs on the guys that I've served with, and we kind of communicate after those 2 events had happened. But Anthony and I really thought that we were going to make our own documentary with GoPros. So this was awesome that Michael found us and we're like, thank you. We don't have to make our own documentary now because we had no idea what we were doing. So Anthony really got into it though with like setting up GoPros, and we did some filming on our own while Michael wasn't there. And some of that made the film. But it takes a lot of getting used to, and kind of like a lot of strength, as Michael said before. We walk 20 miles a day. And when you're in the Mojave Desert where there's like 50-mile-an-hour winds, you're walking 20 miles a day, and then Michael pulls up in a minivan with the camera going 2 miles an hour next to you. It's super motivational. So it's no, it's just how it happened. So it was an interesting process, and it was good to be a part of it. And seeing the outcome, I couldn't be happier, because like Michael wouldn't even show us footage that he shot on the road. He'd be like, we'd like try to peek, and he'd be like, nope. And like he didn't show us until he had something like, you know, similar to what you guys have seen. So that was like a year where he shot it, and we're like, we don't know what this guy's doing. And Anthony's like, wait, he's not here, he's with my family. Like, he was just like, oh my God, what is he asking my family? So like, so you have this like, what's going on back home kind of a thing. So you just never know what was going to happen. But we were both really pleased with the outcome, and amazed that Michael and Marty could take this footage and 500 hours of footage and make it into a 90-minute film. It was pretty amazing.
How different do you think your healing trajectory would have been if you'd gone on the journey alone?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't know if I would have made it, honestly. I don't know. I really don't know. Because what happened was, when Anthony came along and said, I want to jump in on this with you, do you mind if I come with you? And I was like, that's fine. He had to finagle a way to make it into, I need to make this about work so I can take off work for 5 months. So we ended up doing a fundraiser for the nonprofit that he worked for. So he was like, okay, so now we have this walk. It's 2,700 miles we have to walk. Now we have a fundraiser on top of that. And then we have Michael making a documentary on top of that. So it really just like became this thing. And we were concerned at different points that are like, okay, is this going to take away from our healing? Is this going to take away from our what we're trying to accomplish? And the amount of support that we got from the civilian population, or people that didn't know us, was just absolutely amazing. I think we only had to camp out maybe 15, 20 times in 155 days. I mean, there are so many people that were supporting us on social media that would be like, okay, my cousin lives in this next town that you're going to. You guys can stay with him, shower, do your laundry, and they're going to hook you up with someone else 20 miles down the road. So we just like leapfrogged that way. There's people just opening up their doors to us, which was amazing for us, because like I said before, you had that trust issue, and that really just blew that away, that there are amazing people out there that want to help veterans, that want to help them heal. They just need the opportunities to do it and the direction in how to do it. So if I would have done it by myself, I wouldn't have experienced any of that. I probably would have just been sleeping in ditches by myself, so honestly. So yeah, it was good that it worked out the way it did.
A very emotional movie, so hopefully I can get through this question. I am an Army mom of 3 veterans, and my youngest has dealt with PTSD. So I think this question will probably be directed to the doctors. I learned about moral injury within the last year, and it was very impacting to me as my son's mother. It just really made sense to me. And I was very excited to be able to go home and share what I had learned about moral injury with him. But I'm not seeing that being used or taught yet within the VA. And I'm wondering if our counselors and social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists, will they be using or be trained in the moral injury for our veterans?
So I can start to answer that. So I think what's incredible is, over the last year or so, there's been a lot more education on a nationwide level about moral injury. And so, we've done some trainings at the San Francisco VA. Some people at the Palo Alto have done trainings too nationally. There's been a lot of national recognition of this issue and a lot more awareness. And so I think a lot of the providers really, it's now part of the conversation and part of what they're getting trained in. And there are, even though this conversations are starting, there's also a lot of studies right now that are happening about new treatments for moral injury in particular. And so at our VA, we have a moral injury treatment that we use called the impact of killing treatment, and it specifically delves into issues of self-forgiveness and spirituality and really exploring all of those areas. There are other studies that are looking at other treatments for moral injury to adaptive disclosure, something called ACT as well. And so there, on a nationwide level, the VA is moving pretty quickly to study this and then implement some of these treatments as well. And so I would say that if that's something that your sons are experiencing, I hope that you will trust us enough to reach out to us so that they can get some help with that. And I just want to add too that it's really when people come to us because of the shame and stigma that exists, it's often parents like you or loved ones that really bring the people who need the care most to us. And so thank you for doing what you do as a parent, and for all the parents out there who are really helping us to help people who need it the most, and that's what we're really hoping to help with, and that's what we're here to do. So just want to put that out there.
And if I could just add, concepts like moral injury and post-traumatic stress disorder, these are terms that emerge in specific historical contexts, right? And if this were the aftermath of World War I, right, we would be talking about shell shock. So we come up with these different terms to try and capture these very complicated human experiences that are both personal and social. So the concepts really do evolve over time. And I think we're seeing this evolution where there's a recognition that we need to start talking about moral injury as well as post-traumatic stress disorder. And both of those terms are really only as good as the work that they do, right? Any term, any diagnosis is only as good as the work that it does in terms of helping us to identify and describe and respond to and help people, helping us to really build empathy and understanding for one another. And so I think it is really worth asking, why is it at this moment that we're starting to recognize moral injury? And what is the work that thinking about moral injury does at this moment that just looking at PTSD alone doesn't do, right? PTSD is a medical term. It's a diagnosis. It's about the individual. And when we think about moral injury, it's automatically asking us to think about our values and about the potential conflict between personal values and collective values. It's asking us to really look inward, to ask these questions about social values, about politics. It raises all of that for us. And I think that it also really makes us have to think about what are the circumstances that lead us to a world where some people have to face the extraordinary stressors and horrors of war, while most of the rest of us don't have to face that at all. And then they come home and really have to cope with that, oftentimes in isolation. So by thinking about moral injury, what is it that we can do collectively and socially to begin to respond? This is not just an individual diagnosis, right? This is more of a social issue and a social problem.
One of the really emotional parts of the film is the mother that is grieving her son, and I'm just curious if you discovered that story, as the film so much suggests, from the news story, and then how you reached out to that mom and were able to interview her, that she allowed that, and then just also second part, curious if you are in contact with her and what she thinks of the film.
Yeah, great question. It did happen the way basically that you saw it. I was in a hotel room with these guys and it came up on the television, and I was going to Milwaukee the next day. And at that point, it was early in the shooting. It was early in the journey, and I knew that I wanted this film to be about what war looks like when it comes home, and I wanted it to go beyond just the perspective of the combat veteran and to include family stories. And all of a sudden, I was on my way to Milwaukee. She's from Milwaukee. Her son has the same name as me. His name is Jeremiah Michael Collins. My name's Michael Collins. There was all these things. I mean, and she was speaking to the media. And I mean, the last thing I want to do is call up a grieving mother and say, hey, can I come interview you? That's just about the last thing I think anyone would want to do. But there was something inside of me that was saying, she is sharing her story for a reason, and maybe you should just try. So one of my co-producers, I said, hey, can you just do a little outreach? And very quickly she found her number through, someone, and was able to get a message to her, basically. And she said, yes, please invite him to call me. I called her from the airport the next day as I was on my way to Milwaukee, and she was very open to it. She said, yeah, come. We were going to have the services next week. You should come. And so we did, and it was difficult. It was the most difficult thing, really, that I've ever shot, and how to handle that, and what is, how much to put in, how much to show, what's respectful, and so it was just a lot of grappling with that stuff while you're shooting, while you're in the edit room. But she was really happy with it. She's become a friend, and she used the opportunity of the film to really share the fact that her son's death was a suicide, because people just assumed that it wasn't, and she hadn't come out with that yet publicly. So she's come to screenings. In Milwaukee, we were the centerpiece at that festival, played to her community. I think it was an 1,100-seater, something like that, and she came up on stage with us. That was her first time really coming up and speaking. She's now gone back to school to become a social worker. She's very involved with TAPS, Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. So she's moving forward, and is a real big advocate for the film, and doing as well as can be expected, I suppose. I wanted to, and I know we're probably out of time, I just wanted to respond also to the question before about this education on moral injury. When we started making the film, we had a whole campaign in mind, and one of the pillars of that campaign is educating on moral injury. I think it's that time right now where people just don't know about it. And that's one of the things, like as you asked, what's one of the biggest responses that you get from people? They have this aha moment when they hear about moral injury, like, oh, that's what it is. We've had World War II vets and Korean vets and all kinds of people just come up with tears and say, thank you, now I get, like, something has shifted. So we've developed all kinds of educational materials around this, and we just started that. We just started a whole educational distribution kind of phase of the film, where we have it for high schools, we have it for colleges, we have it for institutions, and we're trying to let people know. I mean, we're independent filmmakers and we're getting connected to this whole world. But if any of you all want to share this film with your high school, with your school, with an NGO of your choice, we have ways that you can, and we'll ship all those materials. We also have like modular content. Not everyone can sit down and watch the whole film, so we're creating like online stuff and things for high schools where they just show a couple of clips and they're able to talk about it. And so we've developed a lot of curriculum around moral injury. And there's also elements of the campaign that are about, connecting communities, about healing, just these other modalities of healing, really pointing people towards that, and changing legislation. So I invite you all to stay connected with us, over social media, but also Marty gave me some props, and he'd be mad at me if I didn't hold it up. We have postcards out there that talk a little bit about this. If you want to get in touch with us, you can just come up to me and talk to me. I'll give you my card, or you can give me yours, but you can also fill this out. And if you do want to send this film to your home, to the library of your hometown, or if you want to host a screening at a school or at an organization, we'd love to work with you on that. That's, these things happen organically, as you can see by the way that Jake invited us here. So we really depend on you to keep this campaign going. And so we also have materials. So this is kind of educational, and this is about corporate screenings. And come up to us, talk to us. You can fill this out and hand it back to us, however you want to do it. Sure.
Outreach look like? Sorry, and I'm so happy that you're here at Google. They're
Yeah.
hosting, but they're kind of the pillar, right?
Right.
The example for corporations that we hope they achieve and try to model and mirror. So just wanted to ask about that.
But
Just so everybody can hear, the question was about how do we take care of our veterans, and how do we better treat our veterans, and how do we better get involved? So just so people could hear you, that's all.
yeah, in the corporate setting specifically, and I think that's exactly like this is the example, right? We're at one of the biggest companies in the world, and bringing people together to have a conversation is one way. You know, we've had other models where a community bank took the film and then they showed it in 10 different cities, and they just made it a gift to that city. So they invited the local vets organizations to come and be on the panel after. So they announced it, they rented the theater, they did all that, and then they had a conversation with the community afterwards, and they said, hey, here are the services. These are the vets. These are the families that are in your community. Let's all get together and have a conversation about it. And they also made it a fundraiser. If anyone wanted to donate, it would go to that local NGO. But it was creating awareness, and it was also connecting with their community outside of the business. So it was showing that they really cared. It wasn't just about dollars and cents, that it was about the strength of a community really is businesses reflect that, like, you know. So we are able to work with anyone who's interested in any of these different models. If they want to come in and do something like this, we're happy to do it. If a corporation says, hey, you know, we want to help younger vets, and we want to sponsor this film to go to the Student Veterans of America chapters across the country, we have a way that they can do that too. You know, and that's really meaningful, because that's when people are younger, they're about to go into the workforce, and they're able to have these deeper conversations. They're able to understand what they're grappling with. They now know what is moral injury, and they can talk about it with their peers. So we have all different ways that we're doing it with this. You know, like I said, we are a film with a campaign, and we're doing our best, and we are creating all these materials so they can be used for training. And we have lesson plans, we have discussion guides for communities, for corporations, for schools. And it really takes you all reaching out to us and say, I work here, I went to this school, and just come to us and like, let's work together and make it happen.
Thank you, Michael. And you brought up a good point, and I'd like to kind of close with that one, and we'll certainly have some time to mingle afterwards, but the strength of the community is really the important one, and kind of that's shown here tonight by all of you coming out and supporting this film and supporting these topics, and that's the important part. That's how we get into businesses. That's how we make lives change. So first and foremost, thank you to the panel, Michael, Peter, Tom, Shira, and Natalie. Thank you very much.